just been watching a video by ContraPoints, hi there Nick, called Colour Perception and Objectivity, which is a follow-up on a video you did on images from the Hubble Space Telescope. And for me this is about, and I know you know this, it's about perception and reality, isn't it? Or about being and seeing, as I'm kind of thinking it. Because for me a lot of it boils down to the really minutiae of the language and what the minutiae of that language is doing to our thinking. And particularly in this case, in the word is, the verb to be, which I've been thinking about a lot recently. Because when we say is, you know, what do we mean by that? When you say a rose is red, what do we mean by that? I think one of the things we mean is, or what kind of conceptual metaphors, this is how I'm thinking of it, what kind of conceptual metaphors are being mobilised when we use the word is? And I think what's happening there is it's a kind of container metaphor. This is what I'm working with at the moment. You know, where we're invoking the idea that this concept, a rose, is a kind of container into which we can pile certain properties, like redness, for example, or fragrance, or something like that. And the is the is of containment. And when we do that, that confers upon the concept, confers upon the rose, the properties of containers. You know, that they're sealed entities that have portals that lead things in and out, that have, that encapsulate and make inherent the properties that we say they contain, and say that they have, and this isness that we talk about. But that, I think, and that leads to all kinds of problems, because it's not, you know, clearly a rose doesn't have an inherent property of redness. The way I kind of think of that is a bit of a deviation, is that, you know, we have instrumentation, you know, and so for us, and redness is one of the experiences that reads off on the instrumentation of our consciousness. You know, it'd be equivalent to saying that, like Geiger counters, old-fashioned Geiger counters on movies that click when they're in the presence of radioactivity. It would be like saying that radioactivity contains the property of clickiness, you know, because the relationship between the radioactive source and the Geiger counter is one that produces clicks in the Geiger counter. But you wouldn't say that the radioactive source contains those clicks. It isn't. You wouldn't say it is clicky. And I think the same kind of thing is going on with this rose is red thing. Redness is how we experience that relationship. It's a pretty physical relationship. You know, I'm not getting all idealist about this, and certainly not solipsistic about this. But redness isn't in the rose; it's the read off on our instrumentation. But just to go back to being and seeing, or being and seeming more accurately, I suppose. And I suppose I'm thinking about people like Korzybski. I think I'm right in thinking it's Korzybski. But he talks a lot about that relationship, and the kind of map territory relationship between appearance and reality. You know, the rose seems red is probably a more accurate way of saying that, of describing that relationship than saying the rose is red. Because seeming doesn't mobilise the container logic of isness, of being, where being is conceived of as a container, into which properties are placed. Seeming talks about the relationship between an instrument and the object on which the instrument is focused. So seeming, or appearance, doesn't do that same kind of, as I say, that conferment, which causes those kind of problems, really. I think it still makes perfect sense to say the rose is red. I mean, I'm not denying the reality of the situation. I'm certainly not, as I say, making solipsistic claims. But kind of getting under the bonnet of what we mean when we say that, I think, reveals a different kind of cognitive architecture at work. And certainly a lot of the comments on this video that ContraPoints knows, Nick, have got there are kind of locked in to me, it seems to me, to a container understanding, an understanding in which objects are kind of containers, or concepts that we call objects, are kind of containers into which we place these properties like redness or fragrance or whatever they may be, and then step away from them, imagining that the property will will persist within that container even when we're not looking at it. But like I say, you wouldn't say that with a Geiger counter, would you? Hope that makes some kind of sense.